That's it, fellas. We're off and running with the... No, wait. You're not going to get me on that one. No. It's the 4 Outdoorsmen, and welcome to our podcast. That's a little weird to say, isn't it?
It's very weird, but I'll tell you what. It is weird, but it's fun because it's growth. We're gonna kick some ass around here. It's been a lot of fun making the change.
Yeah, you have to put $1 in the swear jar now. That's how we're gonna do this?
Yeah, you already owe it.
It took us 5 seconds to swear.
Right, I know.
You told me I could.
Well, I'm excited, guys. Now we're in a national syndicate here with the 4 Outdoorsmen, and I haven't been nervous in a couple of years. I'll be honest with you. When we went into studio before, and now we're just kind of huddled around, and usually we're talking about hunting and fishing stories, and now you can see a little jitters. But I'm pretty pumped. Thank you, producer Mark.
Yeah. And welcome to the 4 Outdoorsmen, Alive and Social, the network that we're on, aliveandsocial.com. If you're listening to this, you're probably aware of that. And maybe you used to listen to our radio show, and through our website, you got kind of hooked up over here. So check out aliveandsocial.com. I'm Zepp, if you're just checking out the podcast for the first time. I'm the radio guy, born and raised in South Dakota for the most part. And I guess I wasn't born there, but raised there. We have a pheasant hunting operation out there. GreatPlainsHunting.com.
Yeah. We better get a free trip, Papa.
Zepp. If Dad listens to this, I'm not allowed to go back home until I get him one free plug. But, yeah, so thanks for checking out the podcast. So I'm a South Dakota kid. I love to hunt, to do a little fishing, and a whole lot of screwing around. Our producer, Mark Lukey.
Yeah, well, I'm the guy behind the guy. I don't talk a whole lot, but I grew up in Wisconsin, hunting and fishing with my dad, and got this motley crew.
He has grown up. He's a big human being.
He's a big guy.
I was part of getting this motley crew together and try to make the show run. But other than that, these guys are the stars, like Mr. Boomer over here. Give us a background.
Yeah, you know what? I'm pumped to be here. Boomer here, and I'm one of the 4 Outdoorsmen, and I was born and raised in Minnesota and have a big passion for the outdoors. I started an outdoor media company called Here's My Gear. On Facebook, we got about 70,000 plus followers, and love to fish and hunt all over the place. My mother was a taxidermist, and my dad was a guide, and honestly, I just love to shoot the bull and talk about hunting and fishing all over the U.S., and I think this place that we found a home at Alive and Social is going to be a fun time, but it's not as fun as sitting in a boat next to the wild card strew.
Right. I said this 1.5 years ago, but Boomer's mom was the only lady I know who loved to mount animals. But that's I'm sorry about the Boomer. Strew Man here, Steve Struzinski, east side of St. Paul. I'm the guy that this show should be the 3 Outdoorsmen and Strew Man, because these guys do a lot more outdoor stuff than I do. I love to golf, fish occasionally, hunt once in a while, but I like to have fun and laugh more than anything else. So it's good to be on the 4 Outdoorsmen. Here we go, guys, right?
Yeah, and you'll often hear us referring to Strew as the wild card, and you'll figure that out for yourself as we go. But more than that, Strew, you are purely to the bone marrow Minnesotan. You know the lakes. Yes. You've lived the lifestyle. In all aspects of it. From playing baseball to softball to golf to the hunting and the fishing.
Hamline University guy, played baseball there, head coach there for a couple of years. Have a hunting shack up in Ely, Minnesota. Love to fish, and Vermilion's been most of my life. I love Ely, love Vermilion, and I love the outdoors. So,
beautiful cabin over there in Chautauqua on which lake? Prairie?
On Prairie Lake. Chain of 6 lakes. You've been there. You played bocce ball over there.
I know. The only thing you won't let us do there is fish.
You know what? Chautauqua, Wisconsin is almost as good, Stu, as my hunting land up in Hackensack, Minnesota, and Bacchus, Minnesota, because we've got Webb Lake up there, we've got Trillion Lake, we've got Leech, some amazing fisheries up there. I mean, we need to balance out this Wisconsin talk about fisheries.
Is that the property you were talking about that we've never been invited to?
You're absolutely right. It is as mythical as Zepp's
Great
Papa's hunting land up in South Dakota.
Do you hear that, Dad? They don't even believe it exists.
Oh, geez.
They think I'm making it up for street cred. Fellas, as we kind of launch into the podcast universe here and talk a whole lot of hunting and fishing and outdoors in general with some amazing guests, and we'll be kicking it off tonight, I'm very proud to say, with Dave Orrick, outdoor editor for the St. Paul Pioneer Press.
Yep, good friend.
Has been on the show several times, wrote a nice article about us, so we're happy to kick off our 4 Outdoorsmen podcast with Dave. Wouldn't want to do it. And then number 2 on our list, if we could have anybody, we got him, the man, the legend, Babe Winkleman.
We're going to turn a 1-hour show into about a 4-hour show with Babe Winkleman, because Babe likes to talk.
When I saw Babe was on the show tonight, I thought that to myself. I thought, oh my God, Babe's the kind of guy, but he's got so much to say. He has so much history and so many stories, and he's been at it so long. And this isn't a guy that ever takes a break. I swear there's more than one of him out there.
I stay in touch with Babe Winkleman. We're pretty blessed to have him on the air, and we've talked to him a number of times in the past, but I follow him religiously, and I tell you, this guy is always busy. He walks the walk, talks the talk. He's been more successful than anybody else in this industry, from what I can tell. And he's never slows down. Never slows down.
So we're going to catch. It's been a while since we've talked to him, so he'll have plenty more to talk about. Yeah, Boom.
I think one of the things that's exciting is, we got Dave Orrick on, chief editor for the outdoor section for the Pioneer Press. We're going to have Babe Winkleman on, who's been a legend in outdoor media. But you think about the last 2 years for our listeners out there to stay tuned to the Four Outdoorsmen. I mean, we've had Benny Spies on, who's just a champion of awards from the Sportsman's Channel. We've had Mitch Petrie on, who's the director of all the shows on the Sportsman's Channel.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had Aaron Weeb from Uncut Angling up in Canada, Timmy Moore out in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, talking striped bass fishing, and we've had captains and charter boats down in Florida. We just got a great variety of guests of relationships that we're going to be bringing to this table at Alive and
Minnesota
Social.
DNR, the head of the fisheries, Michelle Karstensen, one of the doctors involved with the Moose program.
Tony Roach.
Tony Roach. So we get into the government aspect of it as well and try to give everybody their piece and their say.
Yes.
And then we'll be doing that again. And, guys, we're on this Alive and Social network at aliveandsocial.com. And I'm just kind of learning as we settle into this network a little bit more about them. And I've been on the website. How many other shows are on this network? I'm going to start listening to a lot more podcasts. And they don't all have to deal with hunting and fishing. In fact, I was just looking when I walked into the studios tonight, The Breakdown. Have you guys heard about this one? Brandon, and I want to say Warren, I hope I got that right, Grant. We've got Grant, our engineer, in here. He's just giving us thumbs up for now. And Cole DeVries break down the Twins games from the insights of a former Major League player. So they take you to the ball game, and they give you the inside scoop, kind of like we try to do with hunting and fishing around here. You can subscribe to them at aliveandsocial.com. I'm going to mention a few other shows tonight. In fact, my buddy BT, an old radio vet like myself, kind of a dream of mine, he just got together and has a show with his daughter. For you foodies out there. And I'm kind of a foodie. I like to McDonald's, Burger King. I hit them all. Taco Bell.
I tell you what, talking about foodies, when I was on the website today, the Babe Winkleman website, his wife Chris is a big chef, cook, and every time he does a show, I forget what his show is called. You've got to zap. That's your job. He's on twice a week, and I've got
Good
the network
fishing?
here. Who knows?
Good fishing and outdoor secrets.
I can tell you this: if we don't know what Zep's gonna, Babe's gonna tell us about it. But his wife has like a 1 minute and 15-minute show about a different recipe every week, and it is this week. It's about beautiful mushroom soup. And, oh God, it's going to be fun.
We'll be catching Babe post-dinner here tonight, so we'll find out what Chris whipped up in the kitchen tonight. But, she's always has something delicious on there. Winkleman.com if you want to check out that website as well.
Yeah. I'm telling you guys, I'm jacked to be a part of this Four Outdoorsmen. I mean, we're going to still touch base on the big polarizing subjects. Mille Lacs is in a mess. We've talked about that in the past, the last couple of years.
Dave's going to talk about that.
We're going to
talk
about
Babe will as well.
And then we've also got, Minnesota waterfall season. We're going to touch base on that later. I mean, intensive harvest season just finished for the goose hunters. And in early September, now you can go shoot some ducks in our great state of the 10,000 lakes. So there's a lot of cool things happening in Minnesota
and
outdoors.
Something that Strewman's going to be doing in a couple of weeks. I might be shooting a bear someplace, I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be being one.
I've seen you shoot a shotgun to get ready for turkey hunting. It's true. I hope you have someone behind you.
I've got my purple Jimmy's hat on, and I'm all set for you.
Is Strew going to be our next bear mauling interview?
No.
I hope not.
No.
He's pretty small for that, though.
No, but I'm going with one of the guys that was involved in that bear mauling incident, and he's going to take me up bear hunting. So looking forward to that. I guess I never shot a bear, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think it's about this time of the year. I know I have not hunted bear in Minnesota, but I think they've started the baiting process. You have to quit baiting. Is it 48 hours before the season?
About,
something like
2-3 days before the season starts.
Yeah,
No
and this
idea.
is also streaming live on aliveandsocial.com. So we're going to eventually start taking some calls and have some participation.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be fun.
Once we get it all figured out.
It'll be fun.
According to my watch, it's time to call Dave Warrick.
Well, let me ask you this question.
While we get a hold of him. We got Grant. We got a guy over here pushing buttons.
Yeah, why Grant's going to get him. Do you guys know of any place where you could cash $500,000 to catch a lot of bass?
No, that's right.
The only place,
Yes.
the only place is where you were last week, right?
At the FLW Forest Wood Cup, and we're going to get into that a little bit with our listeners, where I saw one lucky fisherman cash $500,000.
Amazing. Dave, is that you?
Yeah, Dave Orick here.
Dave Orick, this is Brian Zepp with the Four Outdoorsmen. That's a new title to you.
Hola.
The same old cast of characters. Our first guest here on the podcast. Ever. And maybe our last.
Excellent.
We don't know. Yeah. Dave Orick, he's the outdoor editor for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. TwinCities.com is where you'll find his articles. And I don't have a cough button, so there we go. Got
It's
that
real.
on. That had to happen. Yeah, this is as real as it gets. So, Dave, welcome to Four Outdoorsmen, and thank you. Have you done one of these podcast things before?
Yeah, we do podcasts for the Pioneer Press occasionally. We don't do a whole lot anymore, but
Yeah.
people can download this and listen to it while they're on their way, go fishing or hunting or falling asleep at night, whenever they want.
Yeah, that's kind of a nice thing to kind of take it along with you. And Dave, much like our old radio show, we're going to rip off your material shamelessly for this show. So it's only fitting that you should be our first guest.
That's my
So
job.
we can give you some credit for the material of yours we'll be ripping off. I was on TwinCities.com, and your most recent article, I think, this was a day or two ago, I believe, was about making your family a Boundary Waters family.
That's right. Yep. I get back from a vacation, and unlike most guys who come back to a pile of work, I just write about my vacation, and I still get paid.
That's kind of nice. That one really hit home for me.
Boy, me too. I've got
because
stories, yeah.
I have two daughters, and just moved my youngest daughter away from home down to college, and it's been quite a few years since we've been to the Boundary Waters. But Mark Lukey and I were talking about that earlier. That's one of those legacy trips. It's not a camping trip out to Afton, like, oh, I just moved to Minnesota, or I think I'd just like to get into camping. It's one of those things you had to sort of be introduced to, because it's hardcore camping, I guess, is one way to put it. I mean, you're not going to 12,000 feet or something like that, but it's, it's portaging. It's
You bet it is.
canoeing.
It's a lot of work.
It's hoofing it, and it can be trying for kids. But I took my girls up there. I was lucky enough to know a couple of born and raised Minnesota dads with two daughters the same ages as my daughters, and we were all friends. So it was a daddy-daughter thing. So those guys led the way and sort of, showed us the way to camp in the Boundary Waters and got us started, and it turned into a fine family tradition for us. I would like to think my daughters would eventually get back there with their families someday, but you said the numbers are down and it's not happening like it used to.
That's right. The numbers are down. You gave a great example. And that's the best thing about living in Minnesota is odds are everyone in this state knows somebody who is a Boundary Waters camping family. Even if you're in the cities in a very metropolitan, group of people surrounded by people you think are city slickers, the chances are that your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends, there's someone in there who has made these trips. And you mentioned your daughters there. They've done this. They know that it's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are hard trips. Some harder than others. You never know what nature's going to throw at you. But, hardcore is relative. I mean, it feels hardcore the first time, but if you gradually work your way up to it, a lot of these things won't feel as intimidating. And once you've done it a couple of times, it doesn't feel anywhere near as hardcore as you might think, and probably you guys have that experience as well. Certainly I do. I get to go up fairly frequently.
Yeah. And you're right. You get into that Boundary Waters groove after you've done it for a while, and that's sort of the fun part of it. The first time we went along, we sort of followed, and I said, pay attention to what the fellas here are doing, and I'm always one step behind. Your third, fourth trip up there now, you know what's going on, and the kids know, and you're not barking orders or trying to explain. Everybody's falling in, doing their own thing. The first few years after we didn't go, and it only has been the last few years, the girls were like, oh, Dad, Boundary Waters, that's so much work, and the mosquitoes and the heat and the humidity. But Dave, now that I just moved the other one away, and she went down to Colorado, we dropped her off at college, and I swear, before I read your article, she says to me, I'm going to miss going up to the Boundary Waters.
Yeah.
So a few years removed, the nostalgia starts to come back. And now I guess it wasn't so grueling, was it? So
that's right. It's like all these other outdoors pursuits. If we can get them started when they're young, when they still think we're cool and they don't hate us,
right.
then it'll be ingrained in them. They'll have that confidence. Then they'll hate us for a while. We won't be cool. They'll never want to go. They'll complain, whatever. Boys, girls, I don't think it matters. There'll be some period when that'll happen. But then as they get a little older, they'll remember all those fun times. And what's really important, I think, is that, again, they'll have the basic skills and confidence. So they won't think like somebody who's never been there, I don't know where to start. I don't know what it's going to be like. Yeah. Bears, bugs, drownings. I just have no idea what it's going to be like. They'll know that. So they're gonna. I think you probably set the seed, and you guys will go again. And I bet they're going to take their kids up.
It will.
Yeah, I'd love to go back as a grandpa.
Boomer.
Sometime.
Yeah, Dave. Thanks again for joining us today on the first show of the Four Outdoorsmen. You know, from a fisherman's
turn his mic up, will you?
From a fisherman's perspective, the Boundary Waters is also a pretty cool place. It's one of those spots on the water where you can't use a motorized, place to get around on the canoe or the boat. And it really makes you work, right? It really makes you work as a fisherman, and it really makes you appreciate those walleyes or sometimes the trout or the pike that you're going to catch up there. And I remember as a kid learning a lot of the basic fundamentals about fishing is just going to the Boundary Waters, right? Because you didn't have all of this fancy gear to get you set up with. You packed just the bare essentials, and it's memories that are going to live with me for the rest of my life.
You know, my family, Dave, Strewman here, thanks for being on again. Welcome to the Four Outdoorsmen. My family's been in the Boundary Waters a number of times, and it's been many years because now my kids are in their 40s, late 30s and early 40s. And Diana said she never wants to go back to the Boundary Waters because she doesn't want to crap over a log anymore. That's it. Her idea of camping is curtains on the windows.
Did she wipe with the wrong leaf?
I'm not sure, but
you got to get that soft, wet, moist bark.
But I'll tell you, every time we get together, the conversations talk about fishing and hunting and Boundary Waters, and that's what it's all about.
It was important to me because I'm from South Dakota, and I was introduced to the Boundary Waters by Minnesota fellas, but it was important to me because both my girls were born here, and they've got to know this part about their state. It's amazing to me how many Minnesota adults that were born and raised here that haven't been further north than Duluth.
Right.
They haven't even been up the North Shore.
Right. Those were people in my mind when I wrote that story. I regard it as somewhat tragic when that people who are born and raised here and have never done this, and I think that they can do it. I mean, anybody can do it, and we just need to encourage them. And Boomer, what you said about fishing, absolutely right. It's like I regard it as a refreshing chance to go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah, right.
The fundamentals of the basic tackle, the way to figure out a pattern in the water and the lake. You're not going to have any intel from social media or guys on the other side of the lake giving you reports. I mean, maybe if you're up with a group, but there's no serious guides out there. Your GPS information, if you're going to bother with that, is very limited. If you're going to bring a depth finder, which sometimes I do, you're not going to know the structures the way you're going to know, some of the reefs on the Lacs or the big lakes that everybody hits, and there's really high depth charts for. And so it can be great fishing. It can also be hard fishing. But either way, it underscores the fundamentals and those three basic species: walleye, northern pike, smallmouth. Yep. And if you're lucky enough in the spring or fall, lake trout.
Yeah,
those three basics, man, that is the foundation of all fishing, I think, in fresh water.
Yeah, and Dave, and guys, I don't think that anytime you catch a fish, you don't earn it because you're still on the water and you're still out there experiencing the beautiful lakes we have out here in the Midwest. But you're right. When you're up on the Boundary Waters, you're not in a big Alumacraft. You're usually in a canoe. You don't have a lot of electronics. You don't have like 13 fishing poles like I have in my boat.
Yes, you do.
This assault of rods and reels, but you're really out there, and you feel like you earn it, Dave, when you get that catch. I mean, you're back to the fundamentals of walleye fishing, where you're just maybe using a split shot and you're using a bare hook and you got a leech or a worm on there. You really don't know how deep you are, and you're just jigging on the bottom, and all of a sudden you're looking for different types of structure. You're trying to feel it with your hand if you're on sand, if you're on rock, or if you're on a weed line. And boy, when you get that hit and you bring that walleye into the boat and the canoe or whatnot on the Boundary Waters, God, it's a memory that's going to live for you forever, right? Because you just didn't have all the toys and gadgets that you're used to in today's world fishing.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, let's talk about the article you wrote on Sunday, because you talked about families and inviting families and introducing families to the Boundary Waters and camping in the state of Minnesota. Give us some of those tips you wrote about.
Yeah, well, I had a 6-step process. I mean, the first step was get your head around it. And this is, for guys like us, we've already got our heads around it, right?
Yep.
And a lot of guys who are fairly outdoorsy. And I say anybody who's gone up to their family deer camp probably has their head around the basic idea. But for some people who've never been camping at all, they need to get their head around it. And the best way to do that is to understand that we're mammals. We are well equipped to live without air conditioning and running water.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier the crapping over a log. My wife
I did
too. My wife draws the line, but boundary waters, you don't have to do that. You've got latrines, they call them. Excuse me. Basically, little. You don't have an outhouse. You've just got a little toilet, a pit toilet.
Mm-hmm.
But that comfort of that toilet seat. My kid loved it. I was worried when I took him up there. I said, is this comfortable for you? And he said, actually, it's a perfect shape for a 4-year-old.
I was a little worried when he found him using it in the backyard at home.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's the tough part is, he loves being able to just pee anywhere he wants to pee. And when he comes back, he always wants to pee in the backyard. And I got to tell him, sorry, buddy, you can't do that. We're in the city limits.
Well, and
the basic idea of my advice is to gradually work your way up to it. It's really important to have one person in, a husband or a wife. In Minnesota, like, Brian, your girls, they may be the ones, if they marry city slicker guys, they may be the ones who have the chops for it. But if one person is at least basically cool with the idea of being outdoorsy, getting a little dirty, then convert the other person, ideally before you have kids, because when you're young and single, it's a great time to go do this stuff. It doesn't cost much money to go camping, and you've got plenty of time. Of course, none of us realized it until we had kids. Then we looked back and said, oh my God, we have plenty of time. And then you gradually just step it up from there. And what you said, Brian, about going with other families, that's a great way to do it. If you're unsure, if you don't have gear, you start with just car camping it could be the backyard, could be at a state campground nearby. Once you've got that down, you move up to, I think if you have an opportunity to canoe camp without a portage, I think that's important because you can load up all the extra stuff that you won't need, but you don't know you don't need it.
Right.
You can get across there on the lake to the campsite. And we did that at Glendalough State Park. That was our dry run. That's out near south of Alexandria. Beautiful lake with no motors allowed. There's a couple of canoeing campsites there. And we did our dry run of the Boundary Waters last summer doing that. There's a number of other places you can go.
Hey, Dave, how old is your son, Dave?
What's that?
How old is your son?
Oh, he's 4.
Okay, all right.
And his first trip was last year when he was 3, but that one, we also didn't do a portage. We were in Lake One in the Boundary Waters with another family who had been up with their kids plenty of times, my best friend. So all the kids knew each other, they could play. The big step up this time was, okay, we're going to go alone as a family and we're going to do some portaging.
Yeah, I like that idea, especially if you're getting started and you're just doing it your family and you've not spent time in a canoe, is to do a small little dry run like that. You're right, on a little canoe trip, even if you're just going to get out with the day.
Yeah.
But great if you can get out and camp for the weekend on a non-motorized lake. That's a great way to just sort of dip into it before you're out in the more serious. And for those people I tell around here that have seen there's some beautiful areas in the metro. You drive out to Wisconsin. You don't have to go very far in northern Minnesota to find some beautiful areas. But you've not seen anything like that Ham's beer can. That's really, that's what it is right there. It comes to life up there. If you see the bear, panic. You've probably had too many Ham's beers. But it really is. And you just are not going to get that far away, especially for people here in the metro. My girls didn't know it could be that quiet. They didn't know there were that many stars in the sky. It's amazing.
Those are great points. Yeah, the quiet of the outdoor. A lot of people don't realize that the predominant sound of the woods is silence, man. Mm-hmm. And we don't get silence here in the metro. But you're right. To be clear, with the paddling side of it, you want to be comfortable with your family in a canoe, and you just want to try that out at Lake of the Isles or Calhoun, or we did it at Lake Salem because I lived on the east side. Any place you can just float a canoe for half an hour and just make sure the kid or the dog or the kids and whatever, everybody understands how it works, basic rules. Because once you do load up that stuff with backpacks and sleeping bags and everything, a lot of canoes will get a little tippier and everything, and You just want to make sure you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I can't remember again, and I always fall back to fishing or hunting. But when you're up there fishing in the boundary waters, it's like you went back in time. And don't be surprised if you look around, you do see a bear, you do see a big whitetail buck that you just kind of surprised because
I've
you're
seen
paddling.
a few moose up there.
Moose
yeah.
up there when
Yeah.
you're paddling in stealth mode. But Dave, I know we've got about 5 minutes left with you, and we're talking about how magical the boundaries waters is and doing a dry run. But I want to throw something out to the group here, to Dave, to producer Mark, to the wild card, and Zepp. What are some things for our listeners out there that if you're going to the boundary waters for the first time, let's say you're on a date or whatnot, or you're bringing your daughter, or, what are some basic things that you should think about packing in your truck when you're headed up to the boundary waters? Zepp?
Well, I mean, anything that you basically would need for camping. I used to, if you've done any type of backpacking, remember, we would take a lot more up than we would sometimes take out with us, just for that comfort level. But some of the basic things, I mean, it kind of put me on the spot. Don't take too many clothes.
Right.
We would take a pair of, just good shoes, maybe throw in a pair of old sneakers, that we might want to canoe in case we got wet and we wanted something that was dry. Bags, bring along plastic bags that you're going to take with you, not disposable, obviously, but something to keep things the dry from the wet.
Right.
Bug
spray was always a big one for me. Sometimes
Yeah,
I'd always overlook until I got up to northern Minnesota.
I've got a great tip for you guys.
Dried fruits and your jerky and all that good stuff.
Toilet paper.
Well,
TP.
a good book is one for me, obviously, but it's something that people overlook is dental floss. Not for dental flossing, for hanging clothes on. Dental floss is extremely strong.
Yeah.
It's very small. You can pack it any place, and dental floss can hang.
That's a good
clothes
idea.
on.
I have an old
newfound
military
respect
clothes.
Dental
for a wild
floss is
card.
yeah. And then
Yeah,
they
but
can
you know what,
reuse it,
Drew?
like I like to
You
do.
can
What?
Through modern braided fishing lines, if you've got like a spider wire, that works just as good for dental floss, and to pack an extra spool of that, and you can string your clothes with that too.
Well, Dave, I was
Dental
the smart
floss
guy.
doesn't work so good as fishing line.
Speaking on that lines, hey Dave, it's producer Mark here. My favorite thing about the boundary waters is my dad, who was up there 20 times, had a list, and he was so proud of this list. He would take it out, he'd dust it off, and it just comes from experience, and he knew exactly what to bring, exactly how many pieces of cheese to bring, how many this, that, and it was just he was so proud of that, and he gave it to me the other day.
List.
It's just, the list. It's
list.
It's a sacred,
that's nice.
perfect ingredients and everything. Maybe I should publish that.
And I would say a hoodie too, because no matter what time of year it is here in Minnesota, sometimes it still can get chilly up at nights in northern Minnesota. And don't forget some warm clothes.
Yeah, and don't bring a Bic lighter. Bring some other form. They have the camping lighters or the dry matches or whatever, that sort of thing. Dave, we've just got a few minutes left here, and love that article, love this talk on it. But let's transition and just get your thoughts, because
Here we go.
Talk to
boy.
Babe. We'll
Put
talk
the
to Babe
seatbelt
Winkleman
on.
about it. I want to get you. You've had more than one. I've read, I think, 3 separate articles on it. But just your view of Mille Lacs. We all know where we're at. We don't necessarily all agree how we got here. But where's Mille Lacs for you moving forward?
Sure. Just one last thing on the boundary waters: a full rain suit and a tarp. Those are the overlooked items. You never know if it's going to rain. Those are the things that I would say you have to pack.
Tarps for sure.
But back to Mille Lacs. So here's where we are. Coming in a couple of weeks now, when the weather gets cold, the Minnesota DNR is going to do its fall assessment. That's when they're going to put out the gill nets, and they're going to get their best guess. And it is largely a guess. We're using some statistical methods on what the population is right now for the walleyes. And that will dictate the real big uncertainty hanging out there is what the heck is going to happen with the ice fishing season. Mm-hmm. Can we have any walleye harvest at all? Most of the resort owners I know up there say if it's catch and release only, no one's going to come. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I tend to believe them, that if it's one fish, some people will come. If it's no fish, if you have to catch and release all walleye, then a lot of their traffic is going to be hammered. It's also going to set the stage for all the meetings over the winter, when all the technical committees, and that includes the tribes, when they're going to try to figure out what the heck are we going to do about next year?
Yeah.
What are we going to do even about the opener? I mean, between opening weekend, or if it's a late ice out, really, that beginning of May, and the ice fishing season, that is a major, major chunk of the revenue for a lot of those businesses up there.
Yeah. What Dave, you're speaking about a major chunk for a lot of those businesses up on Mille Lacs, and some of that revenue comes from charters that go out there, that used to go out there and target some walleyes. And Dave, there's been a lot of stuff on social media about the smallmouth bass fishing that is now getting heavily targeted on Mille Lacs by not just sport fishermen, but charters.
And maybe too much so.
Are we over-harvesting the smallmouth, which typically smallmouth was a catch-and-release fish, but because of the lack of opportunity now to bring home a walleye, it seems like a lot more smallies are going into the live well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do have thoughts on it. I mean, I'm concerned about it. I will say this, though. There's some evidence suggesting we don't have to worry that much, but we've never seen anything quite like this. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, they loosened up the smallmouth regulations and said you can keep the statewide 6 fish. What is it, under 20, only one over 20, I think is the idea.
Correct.
They still wanted to protect the trophy fishery. I went out with a couple of smallmouth fishermen, did a story. They were worried as all heck. There was an online petition. A lot of people were saying this is going to kill the smallmouth fishery. As best as anybody can tell, and I haven't heard any fishermen tell me contrary, it did not. It did not lead to much more harvest of smallmouth bass. Basically, people who wanted to go out smallmouth fishing and target the smallmouth are by and large catch and release fishermen, especially if they're going after the Mille Lacs fishery. Most likely place where people are going to kill smallmouth bass, I think, is in places like the Boundary Waters where you really like to cook a meal. However, we have never seen the chartered boats, potentially the launches, all these other people basically focusing on smallmouth now. And we will see. I mean, the thing about smallmouth bass, you and I, we all know that they are not as prolific a fish as walleye in any lake, and they are more vulnerable. And it's a special fishery right there now, that smallmouth bass population. And I sure as heck hope that people, if they're keeping, they're keeping modestly, and that fishery is going to be okay. One of the nice things is you don't catch too many in the winter.
Yeah.
They just, you don't. And so it's not going to be vulnerable like perch and walleye and pike can be in the winter. But, I think that's a big question mark out there, what's going to happen to the smallmouth.
Tie a spoon on and go catch some pike, I say. Dave,
that's what I did the last time I was up there. I went out with a husky jerk, found a weed line, and I hammered him, man.
I love catching pike. I'm a South Dakota kid, so I love catching
Frank
pike.
would have a different opinion on that one, boys.
Frank takes the opposite opinion of everything, and that's what I love about him. Dave Orrick, outdoor editor for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. Find his articles, read them. You'll enjoy the heck out of them. TwinCities.com, and our first guest on the 4 Outdoorsmen. Dave, thanks, buddy. We really do appreciate it.
Hey, guys, congratulations for getting on the podcast.
You
Good
bet.
luck.
We're going to grow. We're going to grow.
Thank you, Dave, for your support.
Help.
We'll let you go tuck the kids in now. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
You bet.
There he goes, Dave Orrick. Appreciate it. That's pretty cool.
It is cool.
Yeah,
That we got talking about boundary waters. We talk to those people listening to the podcast for the first time. They're thinking, I thought this was a hunting and fishing. And we don't usually get off hunting and fishing very often. We have with some of our guests when we have something really compelling. But the boundary water, what is this you're handing me? We could talk about this now on the podcast.
Yeah, I was just passing out. We talked about over harvesting of maybe a particular species of fish, and there's a lot of stuff on social media right now where you're seeing 30 to 40 smallies that are going in a live well.
Yeah,
it's scary, boys. I want our businesses up there to stay intact because I know with the walleye fishing down, and this is a polarizing subject that's going to get people, jumping out of their seats while they're listening to us wherever they might be. But, that's a little scary. We've never had it where you might be putting 30, 40 smallies in a live well. And, they congregate. They're not like a walleye, guys. When they're on those rock piles, when you get on smallies,
you can fill up the cooler.
You just smash them. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, and I think more so than it ever has been, you hope that anglers are conservationist and are minded, and with our shows and other shows and Dave's articles, that people are like, oh, wait a second, there's a problem with some of our fisheries. Let's not overfish them and put them in the same holes they've always been in. Before we want to talk about your most recent trip, talking about smallies down in the southeast of the United States, and you were down there talking about that $500,000 purse. I do want to mention, another show that we have here on the Alive and Social Network, because I just found out about it when I walked into the studios here today. The father-daughter team of BT, Brian Turner, and his lovely daughter Lydia. I didn't know this, but you can bet I'm going to subscribe to this one on aliveandsocial.com immediately following our podcast. They demystify the word foodie for the sake of good food and drink in the Twin Cities. Who doesn't love good food and drink? My gosh, Diana should be a guest on their show.
She should. She's
You
a
guys
cook. Yeah.
should hang an open sign in at your house. So that's each week. Heavy hitters of the service industry open up. They discuss vast and diverse food, wine, and cocktail scene in the Twin Cities. Visit aliveandsocial.com to listen and subscribe. So there's that.
And that PT is.
Oh, it's called, I'm sorry, Foodie Friday.
That's a friend of
Foodie.
yours, an old friend of yours.
BT, well, everybody's an old friend of BT.
Is that right?
He's sort of like the Stru of the radio world. You know how Stru knows everybody?
Everybody.
You bring up every straight. I know him. I dated his ex-wife.
There's
In
going to be
fact,
some.
I'm dating his wife
While
right
they were
now.
still married, yeah. Exactly. Well, BT's like that in radio. If you've worked in radio for more than a month in Minneapolis, St. Paul, you know BT. He's a very generous, just a cool cat.
Yeah.
And so he's got it. So, hey, we're doing something right if we're on the same network as BT.
I hope they can take us. We seem a little rough around the edges than some of these shows.
The outdoors guys sitting in this fancy studio here, we're used to being in a duck blinder on an Alumacraft
Trust
boat
me,
or something.
it's going to get a lot rougher here, and we're just the cooler weather. I know State Fair is rolling in, and we've got some hot, humid days ahead of us. But this cooler weather, man, if you like to hunt, come on, you're thinking the same thing I am, right? Deer stands got to go up. Food
Ducks.
plots got to have ducks, waterfowl.
Putting the decoys out.
We're coming into that golden time of the year for hunters. We've got turkeys in the spring. We've got some varmints in the winter. Of course, our great fishing season here. But the fall, baby, nothing. Lots of things to blast in the fall.
I tell you what, I was just at Game Fair for the last couple weekends,
That's
guys.
right,
The
yeah.
big get together they have in Ramsey, Minnesota. They
Yeah.
have 400 plus exhibitors. I was lucky enough again to MC the $10,000 duck and goose calling contest. I mean, where else than our great state of Minnesota where are we going to give away $10,000 for who knows how to call a duck and a goose?
And what was first prize? Couple of grand?
Yeah, a couple, $3,000 or something like
Really?
that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
first place, and second place got 500 to a
Did
grand.
you compete?
I did not. I was an MC, so I did not compete. And to be quite honest, I'm glad I didn't compete. I would have got my ass handed to me.
Could you
out
tell
there.
the
These guys
difference?
could
Now, you
call.
were there the entire time. Could you
Yes.
tell the difference between the first guy and the 10th guy?
I could not tell.
Or lady. Could be a
or
lady.
I could not tell a difference. They were all really good and champions. I can just tell you one thing, that when I'm in a goose blind or a duck hunting pit, I'm probably not quacking that loud into the call because, one, I can't do it as good as they can, but they definitely put on a show there. It was pretty interesting. And, there was 30 to 40,000 people there in Ramsey, Minnesota. And then after that, I jumped on a flight and I went down to Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Yeah.
And went to my first ever bass championship. And I tell our listeners out there that, we've teased a guest, Nicole, on the show, and I went down there with her. And I've never been to a contest where someone wins $500,000
To fish.
to fish. And that's exactly what happened. It was a 3-day event there in Hot Springs, Arkansas. It was 50 of the top bass anglers in the world. Then they went to the next day in round 2, and they did this weigh-in, guys. It was in this arena that looked like the Super Bowl. There was lights, fireworks, paper shooting from all over the place. They'd walk up there and hold their bass. And it was the most amazing spectacle I've ever seen. And they had these tanks. I was behind stage, and I believe his name was Justin Moore, a big country music star, the last day. And he did a free concert. So this place is just jamming for an hour. And here I am in the back, and I look to my left, and there's a guy in like a suit and coat right next to me, and he's got a little earpiece in. And I kept thinking of the movie The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner.
Right.
And I'm like, I wonder what's going on. And then there's like another guy to the right of me, and they're kind of, big and buff like the wild card here.
Yeah, that's
and,
me. Yeah, that's
and then
me.
there's another guy in like nice Wrangler jeans and a white shirt, and it's the governor of Arkansas. And here I am in the middle of the Secret Service
Oh, that's
as
funny.
the governor's about to go greet people for someone who's about to win $500,000. And then Justin Moore gets off stage, and they have all the boats lined up there. And these bass fishermen, they have the top 10 there, and they start with number 10, and they go all the way up to number 1. They get up there, they grab their 2 biggest bass. The crowd is going absolutely chaos.
Yeah.
And the guy who won $500,000, was really deserving. His name was Brad Knight. And again, I don't know the bass world that much, but just as a general outdoorsman, it was a heck of an adrenaline rush to see someone win $500,000. But the cooler thing than that, I got to say for our listeners, is I had a chance to help the Special Olympics of Arkansas down there. And what it was is there was about 50 men, women, boys, and girls that had some special needs. And the Arkansas Game and Fish stocked this half-acre pond with about 300 channel cats just for these boys and girls and men and women to get out there. And I went out there and I joined some other fishermen that I've known throughout the industry in Nicole, and they had the opportunity to help these kids catch fish. And what an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
You get kind of wrapped up in this world of ours, and you're out there competitively or for film or for radio, and you kind of take advantage of it. Sometimes you got to catch yourself. And then when you're out there just kind of baiting a hook full of night crawlers and you're just throwing it and dragging it on the bottom, and you set the hook for one of these boys or girls or men or women, and you see them reeling it in, it just really kind of prioritizes what's important in life. So I tell for all our listeners out there, if you ever get a chance to go to one of these big tournaments from the Bass Series to the FLW, man, it's like going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I love getting out to those big events. I went to my first NASCAR event last year, and go NFL football we have here in town. But you need to go to like an NFL playoff game, which we don't generally have here in town. But hey, the clock's ticking, guys.
Wow.
4 Outdoorsmen here on the Alive and Social Network. Let's give Babe Winkleman a call. We want to get him on.
I love
before the night gets too late.
There.
And I want to talk more about that tournament and what you did down there after we talked to Babe.
While the phone's ringing here, what was the difference between first place and second place?
I think it was like 1 pound.
Hello.
Wow.
Mr. Winkleman.
Babe's on the line.
Hello there. Is this Drew?
Yeah, this is Drew. And we got Brian Zepp. Zepp's on the left side. How you doing, Babe? Welcome to the 4 Outdoorsmen. Last time you spoke to us, we were a different name. We've gone podcast. We're now the 4 Outdoorsmen. Thanks for being on.
Oh, my pleasure.
Oh,
my pleasure, man.
Winkleman.com. We all know Babe. I mean, good Lord, you're a legend now. Do people call you a legend? Are you comfortable with that?
That's not why I got in the business, or not why I do what I do.
Yeah.
It never has been to become famous or become a legend or become an icon or become any of those other words that people rip on you. I wanted to find a good way to make a living at something I loved more than anything else, and that was fishing and hunting.
Hey, Babe.
And being outdoors.
I'll tell you what, Babe and I talked a couple of times today, and we were supposed to discuss what we were going to talk about tonight. And, Babe, I would think as we get older, we hope we would slow down and have a little more time for a lot of things we want to do. And I called you, maybe you called me first, and we're going to talk. And you said, I'm on the phone, and I'll get back to me in a little while. I called you an hour and a half later, and you were still on the phone with the same person. Babe is busier now than he ever has been. What's going on, Babe?
It's been crazy. First, to answer your first question, a week and a half ago, the 15th of August or 16th, whatever.
Yep.
I was inducted into the Outdoor Legends Hall of Fame, which is my 4th Hall of Fame.
Attaboy.
So, yeah, they do. That was down in Nashville. My wife went with. It was really nice. Nina Wood was inducted with me, and several other really, really good folks, and it was just a fun event. But, yeah, I'm busier than I've ever been. The fishing and hunting business is going well. My daughter and wife are up crossbow hunting black bear in Ontario at the moment. When we're done with the show, I'll get to find out how they did today, but they've been up there for 3 days while it's been raining. But I've been down here working. Our food products are going well. The batteries are going well. The cleaning products are going nuts.
Winkleman.com, I was on there. You talked about your lovely bride, Chris, and we were talking about one of her recipes earlier. We'll mention
yes,
that again as we get back to it a little bit.
Yeah.
You're having to fend for yourself there while they're up in Ontario hunting, but I'm sure you know how to whip a dish or two together. Babe Winkleman Outdoor Secrets, good fishing at Winkleman.com. You can find his shows on NBC Sports. But Babe, as we kind of approach deer season here a little bit, and food plots have all been put together. Minerals have been put out for a while now to attract those big bucks, and the doe really that are going to bring in those big bucks. Is it getting too late in the season for guys that are a little bit maybe behind the curve to get something done with their land to attract some of those does and bucks?
Well, last Saturday in the rain, I went up to the ranch with my friend Mike, and we refreshed all 10 of the vitamin sites. I use 100 Specialties Vitarect 26. That stuff is incredible. I mean, they eat holes in the ground trying to get at any seepage of it that's left over. It's amazing. But then we refreshed all of our cameras and took all the SD cards out, put in new ones, put in all new batteries and so forth, and set them back up on the mineral sites again. And I was just blown away. We have got one huge buck, just a gargantuan thing. And then there were 6 other different 10-point bucks I had film of.
Wow. Well, just 6 other 10.
I put those Vitaracts out originally the last of April.
Yeah.
And then I refreshed them at the end of June, and now I just refreshed them at the end of August. I refresh them every 60 days. And this will be the last time we'll refresh them for the year. About the middle to the end of September, they stop using them.
Babe, for our listeners out there, and it's Boomer, and thanks again for joining us on the 4 Outdoorsmen and everything that you've done in the outdoor industry. You talked about refreshing the vitamins every 60 days, and you were pulling the SD cards for patterning that big buck. For our listeners out there, babe, what kind of advice would you give them as far as when you start to pattern where deer are at what time? So I know you're pulling those SD cards and looking at that big deer that you're going to target for a harvest, but when do you start to get serious about it, babe, and say, all right, this is the time of day that this big buck's going to be around this deer stand?
Yeah.
Well, it depends upon the time of year you're going hunting. We're going to be Chris and Carly and I are going to bow hunt up at the ranch opening week for about 5 days, starting opening day. And I'll be up there checking the cameras and doing other things a couple of days prior to that, depending upon when I get done in Wisconsin. I'm going to be bow hunting there first. But also, what I'm going to be patterning them doing right now yet is coming to food. The bucks are going to be in bachelor groups. Those big bucks, I've got that gargantuan buck and 2 other 10 points that'll both go over 150, all 3 on the Vitaracts site at the same time or right around it.
Wow.
When one would feed, then they would knock, paw the other ones and stuff. I got videos of them too, so I can really look them over well. They'll be hanging in groups like that. I've got a tree stand about 30 yards away from there, where I'm going to put my wife or daughter. And hopefully it would do my heart good to have my daughter or my wife, either one of them, kill that gargantuan buck rather than me. As much as I would like to, it would still make me happier to see them do it.
Hey, babe, you're talking about Vitarex and I being a rookie as far as doing that kind of thing. What are the rules as far as how often you can put that stuff out and how late can you do it prior to the season?
Well, I put mine out, like I said, the last time I enhanced is at the end of August or mid-August or so.
All right.
Usually around the 20th of each month. I start about the 20th of April trying to do it about every 60 days. I don't put it down after that. History has simply shown me that by mid-September, once they shed their velvet and so forth, they stop using the Vitaract sites.
Interesting.
They're starting to change reasons that they eat. They eat in summer to grow bone mass. They eat in summer to gain body weight and muscle mass and all those other things. So they're looking for certain kinds of things. When they get into fall, they're like any other critter. They need to try and put on a layer of fat for the lean times to come, particularly the bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really capitalizing. We have a lot of oak trees out there, and they'll be hitting those acorns just heavy. And then we've got corn and beans and alfalfa and clover and some brassicas as well. But mostly clover, alfalfa, corn, and beans. But, what we've done at the ranch has been for all forms of wildlife. I got a picture of 2 pictures in a row on the trail cam. Here's a 10-point buck. He's got to be 150, 155, a good one, standing at the Vitaract site. And the next photo, you see his rear end going out of vision and
full-grown bobcat chasing him.
Oh my
Cool.
God!
Oh, boy.
You got that on
A
camera.
bobcat. Yes, I have it on film.
Oh,
a bobcat after that great big buck.
That's
I bet you
interesting.
got balls, boy.
You know, babe,
Maybe not too much for brains, but
yeah, speaking of brains and balls, babe, you talked about bachelor groups for bucks. Can you explain to our listeners what that means?
well, during the summer, the does are off with their fawns. When they fawn in spring, they kick off last year's fawn. And then it tries to hang around with them some and so forth, but it doesn't work very well. And then those young ones, the 1.5-year-old deer, go off, start making their own way. And the doe stays with her fawn, and the bucks go off by themselves. And they spend the summer and going into fall by themselves. Once they lose their velvet and so forth, their hormones start to change. They start to be way into a pre-rut. The rut starts as early. I mean, I've had scrapes one year in August, but every year on the full moon of September, they'll start scraping about 4 or 5 days, 3 days before that full moon, and will scrape like hell.
Wow.
I have pictures of an 8-point buck in velvet breeding a doe on September 12th, so about 6 years ago or 7 years ago. Got a whole series of photos of it.
Wow.
But that's rare. The biologists say that 5 to 15%, depending upon the year, of the does will get bred in September and October. About 70% of them are bred in November in our part of the world here. And our part of the world goes all the way down to southern Oklahoma. The rut is the same. And the rest of them, depending, will be bred in December or sometimes even later. One year they went till the 26th of February.
Wow.
Usually, though, the big bucks go off first with the oldest does. And when the whole rut thing starts. Last year I pulled into Kansas, and there's a calendar that I go by that shows the rut periods in relationship to the moon and so forth. It's based off of Dr. Charles Alsheimer and Dr. Wayne LaPon's book called Hunting the Rutting Moon. And they've got it down to a science. And we pulled in there, and I told him, he said, oh my God, we killed our first big buck tonight. One of the guides had killed one that scored like 174 or something.
Wow.
And I said, you ain't going to believe what's going to happen in the next 2 days. In the next 2 days, there were 6 bucks shot between 160 and 176.
My
Unbelievable.
gosh.
As those great big giant bucks started to move to find those first few does, and they're always the oldest does, come into heat. When they found those does, there might have been in some cases a half a dozen, or I've seen as many as 13 bucks on a single doe on rare occasions.
Wow.
But that's what happens at first, and then as more does come in and more does come in, then they get full-time into the rut, and once it gets going, that's what they're thinking about.
In
between. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm thinking about that trailer that you're bringing home from Kansas with all those monster trophies. You leave that one uncovered to kind of show off all the way home. A lot of envious hunters you're passing along the way.
Hey, babe, you've been doing this since the 1970s, give or take, starting from you started media a long, long time ago, the first off commercial and whatnot, Babe Winkleman Productions, NBC Sports Network. After all of these years...
We run on about 6 different or 7 different networks.
You're
NBC
one,
Sports,
yeah.
Destination America 5 times a week on Pursuit, the A&G Network, Time Warner Cable, Comcast Cable,
Wild
and 4
TV.
times a week in Canada on Wild TV.
But you've done it. You've done it all. What you talked about this big buck, and when you mentioned the big buck that you saw on the camera recently, your voice changed, and it seemed to me like you got excited a little bit. What excites you? What gets you going?
See the stud,
What gets you going after 40 years in this business?
All of it. Everything. It's like people always ask me, what's your favorite fish to catch? And I tell them the next one I'm catching.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Well, let's.
It's all good. Every experience you have in the outdoors are good. When you're trying to match wits, God built us as predators, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
We happen to be omnivores, so we got to predate on a couple of things.
Yeah.
To get out there in the woods, they have senses we don't have, and we have abilities they don't have. but their senses of smell and senses of eyesight and senses of hearing are so much keener than ours. To find that big buck and know that he's on my land itself is exciting as heck. If I can pattern him, I can get those 3 big bucks coming by my daughter's stand, going into the cornfield to eat, because that's what they'll still be doing opening day, and they'll be hanging together yet. They'll still hang together until into the first part of October. And then they go into a period where I think it's their hormones changing quite a bit. But they become from a group animal where they're hanging together, they now become solitary animals.
Cool.
And the only thing that brings them back together again is when those first few does come in to eat.
Do you find them a little...
And then when the... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when they split like that and they scatter like that, and you get into the rifles or close to the rifle season, then are they a little bit harder to pattern then and to predict?
Well, they certainly are. In that period of time in mid-October,
That's a good question.
They're mostly nocturnal. You can pattern them with trail cameras. You can know which areas they're living in. I mean, when I go up again and change the cameras about the 10th maybe or so of September or something like that, I'm not going to put them now on Vitarac sites anymore. I'll take them off the Vitarac sites, and I'll start putting them on main deer trails, some cases deer trails where I have stands close to bedding areas.
Yeah.
I want to find out where that dude is bedding and what time he's coming up out of bed.
Yeah.
And they always have more than one route. It is rare that they'll take the same route every day. They just don't do that. They'll vary it some with wind and other things, and I think just by the nature of what they are, they do that. But so I will try and pattern them when they're in that really tough period of October. If you're going to get a glimpse of them, it's going to be at last light. Rare you'll be able to get in early enough in the morning to get there before he does. Sometimes you can.
Yeah.
But that's your only shot. And then they're just going to crawl under cover. The second factor that makes all the difference in the world. Stu, you're a golfer, right?
I am.
I know you are.
I'm not a good golfer, but I'm a golfer.
Well, how'd you like to go golfing this weekend? Only you've got to wear a big fur bodysuit.
I wouldn't play very well.
Depends how many drinks you had, babe.
Well,
that's a good point.
Here's the other thing that happens there, and you can see it on the trail cameras. It's starting now already, in August here. They're starting to lose their summer hair.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of September, they will have lost their summer hair and get their winter coat. When it is warm out, deer have a hell of a lot more difficult time keeping cool enough than they do keeping warm.
Makes
in
sense.
that period in October, a lot of those bucks will crawl down. We have one area called a sanctuary, and it's mostly tamarack swamp, and there's a couple of creeks that join on it, and just really swampy, miserable, mucky crap to walk around with. But inside of that tamarack area, there's about a dozen or 15 little humps. They might be 10 to 30 or 40 feet across, and they just come up 2-3 feet higher, and they're harder ground. Or sometimes right down on water's edge. Sometimes they will even lay in the water and bed in it. We'll hear them walking down that creek. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. They have no problems at all with water.
Yeah.
And if it's real warm out in mid-October, you aren't going to see them, period.
Yeah, the
You're
swampers.
just not going to see them. The only reason you start seeing them later, so many people have always said in Minnesota, well, you got to have snow and a really good frost to get those bucks in the rut. That has nothing to do with it. If it's cold enough out, the does and the bucks will run all day long, and then, yes, you will see more of them when it's cold, opposed to warm. When it's warm, they've got that heavy winter hair on already, and the does simply lay down, and the bucks lay down with them, and they do everything at night.
Huh. I never really even gave that a lot of thought. Yeah.
Well, they got another ability that we don't know about because we don't have it, but they can see by ultraviolet light as well.
Yeah.
When a whitetail flips his tail up, his entire rear end of his body and the underside of his tail is all UV reflective. They can see that as clear at night as they can during the day.
Good Lord, there's like a million things you know that I don't know. I've been watching your television shows for 20 years. It's just, it's endless.
I study it and study it and study it and study it. I live it to try and help other people understand what the truth is, and I try very, 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 very hard to get at the essence of truth.
Hey, babe, you're talking about... Go ahead.
I don't score deer, for example. They're either just a buck, good one, or a big MF.
You were talking about whether it's
that's the three scores I was brought up with.
Okay, a couple of more things, baby. You're talking about you like to make people understand. What's a 66? What's that say?
60 minutes.
60 minutes. That's about 1 hour.
Very good, Stro.
Are we done?
I know we've got to wrap it up. And Babe, we're talking with Babe Winkleman, Winkleman.com, and can't thank you enough for being a part of our first For Outdoorsmen podcast, and we're going to want to bug you again in the future. I know you're coming up on it's always a busy time, but to listen to your passion, but it's more than your passion, Babe, because you have this need to want to teach and to want to allow others. You talk about your daughter. You talk about your daughter scoring that big buck, or going up to Ontario and getting that bear. I believe last year she got her first boat, her first bear. I think that is when it was.
And that was a calico too,
And that was a calico. You talked about that on our show, and that's I think the most important quality of Babe Winkleman, because you could go out and do all of this and amass all of this knowledge and passion and keep it for yourself and your immediate family, but you give it. And you've been giving it to all of us for decades, and thank you. We're still learning. Don't stop. And
thank you.
And thank you for being our guest on the Four Outdoorsmen, Babe.
He's a teacher.
I'll never stop. I mean, we make our living by helping people understand the outdoors a little better, if we can, and try to inspire them to participate in the outdoors, particularly with their family, because I firmly believe when you go to your grave, the only thing you have of value to take with you is the treasure trove of memories you have. And those with your family in the outdoors will be the most intimate ever.
And we'll leave it right there with Babe Winkleman.
Babe, thanks a lot for being on the 4 Outdoorsmen. Appreciate it, sir.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for the job you guys do in sharing the outdoors with so many listeners. I know that you've got a strong following.
We do.
One other thing. Graham... those guys, the waterfowl hunting outfit.
Maxed Out Guides.
Yeah, Maxed Out Guides on Labor Day weekend. I've taken 4 of my daughters, and we're going to hunt down by Becker, Minnesota, because that's when the early goose season opens.
Yeah.
We're hunting the first day on a golf course on Pebble Creek Golf Course.
There you go.
That should make for an interesting show.
If you see Stru out there driving, just wave at him while he's on the tee.
Yeah, I'll holler 4 for sure.
Yeah.
Stu, if you come up, I'll have my clubs with, because the goose hunting is going to be morning and evening.
We're sending you, Stru, babe. I hope you'll be patient with us, because we're going to bother you often.
Do it.
Thank you, sir.
Love it.
Happy hunting, and give your family our love.
You guys. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, babe.
Thank you, sir.
That's funny.
Wow.
That's
an hour
funny.
already, boys.
I know we didn't even get into Chris's kitchen and talking about the new recipes there. And as we got that started, we should have looked back and talked about his summer fishing. I know he loves to get into the bass. Go ahead, Mark. Say it out loud. I can't.
I think you have one more other show to read.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wanted to mention another show.
Live on Alive and Social.
I was going to go through and just pick out some of my favorites, but there's so many on the AliveandSocial.com network that I think I'm going to go with Apples to Apples. This is another sports show because it's got such a clever name. Dig this, you guys. It's a father and son team, Scott and Drew Applebaum. Get it? Apples to Apples. And you thought the 4 Outdoorsmen was catchy. Find out if Dad really knows best. Visit AliveandSocial.com.
Nice.
Fun, lively banter weekly. The Apple Bombs. Apples to Apples with the number 2 in there. You'll find it very easily on AliveandSocial.com. When you're subscribing to the 4 Outdoorsmen, grab some of those other shows. Check it out. Grant, our engineer, thanks for pushing the buttons. Guys, we're wrapping up here. Boom. one last thought?
Yeah, you know what? Next time we're on the Four Outdoorsmen, we're going to have a lake report, and we're going to talk about what it was like to see someone cash $500,000 for catching largemouth bass.
Come back
Fun.
to the podcast. We're coming to an exciting time of the year. We're going to be talking a whole lot of hunting on the Four Outdoorsmen, and we'll give the wild card the last word.
Goodbye. Thanks for listening to the Four Outdoorsmen. We'll see you next week. Whatever. I'm not sure. What do I say? Take care.
That's perfect. Let's
God
do this
bless.
again.
Take care.
Cut. Can we start over?